It's here! Candlekeep Mysteries is now available, and today I'm going to be giving you my first impressions and thoughts on the book. I'm also going to be giving away a copy of the book on D&D Beyond, so stick around to the end of the video to find out how you can win your own copy. This video is sponsored by The Vault of Magic by Kobold Press, now on Kickstarter. More on them later. Greetings gamers, I'm Anto, and like you, I've been eagerly awaiting the release of the new D&D book for the last few months, and I've been awake since about 5 AM this morning reading through the book to bring you my thoughts on it. Now we're going to break this video down into sections, and everything is going to be time-stamped down below to make it really easy for you to find what you're looking for. So, let's dive into it. The premise of this sourcebook is the players have found themselves in the library fortress of Candlekeep. The section on Candlekeep dives into some pretty nice details about the library, how things work there, and who the players are likely to encounter while they're in Candlekeep. And it even mentions when this book is set in the Forgotten Realms timeline, which makes it really easy to fit it in alongside other adventures. For example, this book is set during the same time as Descent into Avernus, which means you could totally include an adventure or two from this book in chapter 1 of that adventure. That being said, some of the information we get in Candlekeep Mysteries does directly contradict the information we got in Descent into Avernus. It's not a huge deal and it's easy enough to change on the fly, but it's a sign that perhaps continuity wasn't being considered or checked as thoroughly as it could have. A lot of the Candlekeep lore we get here is really cool, and I think there's enough given here along with the map that players could spend a lot of time at Candlekeep or visit the location multiple times and still find fun and interesting interactions outside of the adventures presented in this book. Now, one problem I do have with Candlekeep Mysteries though is that there isn't a central narrative presented. Each adventure gives you a hook of some kind as to why your players might find themselves caught up in the events of the adventure, but it would have been nice to have some kind of narrative that connects these 17 adventures and gives the player a reason to keep coming back. Because there isn't any strong unified narrative here, all the information on Candlekeep could just be set dressing that may never come up because the book doesn't present an engaging reason to learn more about the location when it isn't crucial to the plot of a specific adventure. Which brings me to my biggest gripe about the book, and it's one we kind of need to talk about up front. Candlekeep Mysteries is a book of 17 adventures with a multitude of writers of different backgrounds, which is incredible, and I love how much Wizards have really embraced all these different voices. However, it does come very much at the expense of a unified vision in the book. The book feels like 17 different products, or a collection of 17 magazine articles gathered together for a collective printing, rather than an intentionally designed product containing 17 elements. Now, what do I mean by that though? Well, for example, there is no appendix to the book, which means that the many new monsters and items and other elements that you might want to incorporate into other adventures are spread throughout the book and not found in one easy to reference location. If you're using something like D&D Beyond, that's not a problem, but if you're running using the printed version of the book, it makes referencing things much harder than it needed to be. Like I said before, there's also no unifying hook for the players to be in Candlekeep. It exists as the backdrop and the start of these adventures, but there's no reason given for why the players might be here in a broader sense, and no information on how you would combine the adventures into a campaign focused around the library. Tales from the Yellowcrest Portal is a similar anthology, but in that book we got a short section with advice on how to combine the adventures into a campaign. Something else that Yellowcrest Portal has that Candlekeep is missing is a brief summary of the adventures. This is a crucial element, I think, to include in any adventure or anthology, as it's how the Dungeon Master is going to decide whether the adventure that they're reading about is for them without having to read the entire adventure. It really wouldn't have taken much space to put a small paragraph describing the crux of each adventure near the front of the book. In fact, I would happily have dropped one of the adventures in the book to free up space for a summary of the adventures and then an appendix at the back of the book, which I think would have made this a much more user-friendly experience. But with all of that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about the adventures. I'm not going to go into deep diving spoilers or plot information for this. I just want to give you a brief intro to the adventure, kind of thing that should have been at the start of the book, so you get an idea of what's included in this product. The Joy of Extradimensional Spaces is a first level adventure, and aside from a pretty weak reasoning to kick things off, it's a really solid starter adventure. It's very linear, which means it might not be the most exciting thing for veteran players to run, but I think it's got a great adventure for a new group or a one-shot for folks to see if they really enjoy playing the game. It's got a good mix of investigation, combat, magical intrigue, and a little bit of fun social interaction, and the premise is the characters are looking for Martius, a sage in the Candlekeep library, and they end up trapped in an extra-dimensional mansion. The adventure is pretty lighthearted and fun, and I got really old school Disney cartoon vibes with all of the different things that were going on, and I think that would make it a really good adventure to run for kids. As I said though, it's a pretty linear adventure and there's really only one way to solve it, so if your group like to think outside of the box, it might not be a good option for them. Mazfroth's Mighty Digressions is a second level adventure which, once the players take the hook, leads them on a path of investigation and intrigue into the city of Baldur's Gate. What I like about this adventure is the villain is given motivations beyond being evil, and the optimum path through the adventure seems to be one of non-violence. If you have a particularly murder hobo inclined party, they may struggle with some of the combat thanks to the enemy's resistances and immunities, but all the information you need to resolve the adventure peacefully is given, which is something that I really like. The Book of the Raven is on the surface a fairly straightforward, old school adventure where the players discover a treasure map that leads them on an adventure. But the most interesting thing about this third level adventure though is that it has a direct path to take the players into the Shadowfell, making it a pretty good way to transport your players into Barovia and pivot your campaign into the Curse of Strahd module. The adventure itself is filled with gothic tropes like grand spooky mansions and misty graveyards, and if you enjoy the gothic, this is a great place to start. A Deep and Creeping Darkness is a fourth level adventure where the party uncover the story of a town above a platinum mine that has vanished. The hook for the adventure sees the players hired by a mining company to find out what happened to the town of Vermilion, and they are pointed towards Candlekeep as a place to start their search. This is a simple but strong hook as the players have a clear understanding of what they're doing right from the get-go. What I like about this adventure is it also outlines ways to incorporate it into a long-term campaign, allowing the players to get a stake in the mine if they help solve the mystery, allowing them to profit from it or use it as a home base, both of which are excellent motivations to keep the players invested in the adventure, even if they're not quite sure what's going on moment to moment. Shemshime's Bedtime Rhyme is another fourth level adventure with a really interesting premise of a magical curse that sees the players quarantined in an isolated location with increasing pressure. What I really like about this adventure is that it front loads its information and gives a summary of the individual parts that make up the adventure, making it really easy as a dungeon master to get a clear sense of where the adventure is going without having to read the whole thing first. The book itself is a pop-up book that is as hilarious as it is creepy, and I definitely think it's one of the more memorable books from the anthology. The Price of Beauty is a 6th level adventure that doesn't come with a hook. The adventure starts with the players either already in possession or specifically looking for the book. This makes it really easy to place this adventure into an existing campaign setting, but it does put a lot more of the work onto the DM to figure out how to incorporate it into their game. As a 6th level adventure, that's not too much of a problem, and hopefully most DMs by 6th level and running for 6th level will not have a problem incorporating an adventure into their campaign, but it would have been nice to get some kind of hook. The adventure itself has got some pretty interesting villains that seem like it would be a lot of fun to roleplay, especially if you're willing to kind of ham it up and take their personalities to the extreme. The Book of Cylinders has one of the least inspiring introductions to an adventure in this entire book. A character approaches the party and tells them the town needs defending from an enemy. To me, the best thing about this adventure though is that it brings the Gripply, a race of frog people, into 5th edition as creatures. We've not seen the Gripply since 3rd edition, I think, and I've always preferred them to the other frog race, the Grown. This adventure also contains one of my other favourite races, and by the adventure's end shows that their traditionally evil stereotypes might not be totally accurate. Sarah of Yellowcrest Manor is a 7th level adventure and by far the most dark adventure we've seen in the book so far. There is a sort of content warning at the start of the book that talks about having a conversation with your players about what they're comfortable with, and this adventure definitely justifies the presence of that section. This adventure is dense and feels much more like the framework for a short arc rather than a one-shot, but as the DM I think you'd need to add a few elements to pad it out, but the bones of a short campaign arc are all there. Lore of Lurue is a fairy tale inspired 8th level adventure. This is another fairly sizable adventure that contains random encounter tables and covers a pretty sizable area. This adventure, possibly more than any other though, takes agency away from the players as the players assume characters in an existing story. Because of this is the adventure I would personally cut from the book to make room for adventure summaries and an appendix. Candlekeep Dekonstruction is a level 9 adventure and it has the best premise, in my opinion, in the whole book. A cult wants to launch part of Candlekeep into space. This adventure is a ridiculous romp filled with silly names and hilarious premises, and if you want something lighthearted and silly, this is the perfect adventure for you. Zikran's Zephyrean Tome is a 10th level adventure that has a pretty weak opening. The conditions by which this book, which none of the residents on Candlekeep have been able to open, reveals itself to the players is paper thin, and it's completely possible, actually probable, that the players won't actually trigger the conditions that the adventure lays out for the book opening. It's not a huge problem, but it is something that could have been improved with a little more consideration and refinement. Once open though, the book reveals a story of a genie who offers to grant a wish to the players in return for them doing a task for it, which is about as strong of a motivation you can get to go on a quest. The Curious Tale of Wisteria Vale is an 11th level adventure that sees the players travelling to a demiplane and getting caught up in a series of events as a result of some wacky magics. There's some really interesting use of magic in this adventure, which should make it a lot of fun to run. The Book of Inner Alchemy is a 12th level adventure that sees the players hot on the tail of a corrupted monk who wants to achieve immortality. The major beats of this story play out like a kung fu movie, and it's an adventure that is an absolute must if your party contains a monk. The adventure also recontextualizes Key and gives it more reverence that it has in the real world, which is really nice. And the final showdown of this adventure would be great for getting those Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon vibes into your game. And the whole adventure is like a really respectful love letter to the genre. The Canopic Being is a 13th level adventure that, after a pretty generic and boring setup, has about as strong a hook as you can get. The players have to embark on an adventure to save their own lives. The adventure has strong Egyptian vibes and would work well in any desert setting. The Scrivener's Tale is a 14th level adventure that is built around a ticking clock to keep the players moving, again by putting their own fates as what's at stake. I know that some groups aren't fond of this, but I find the ticking clock is one of the most powerful tools you can use as a dungeon master, particularly in a one-shot, to keep things moving and ensure the players hit all the beats of the story in the time that you've got together. Not knowing how long is left on the ticking clock is a great way to make sure the players stay engaged and don't become bogged down by choice paralysis. Alkazaar's Appendix is a 15th level desert themed adventure that is pretty loose with its hook and its lead in, making it really easy to introduce to your group. The adventure could easily be removed completely from Candlekeep as a framing device, and it wouldn't really cause any issues at all. The players are given a book detailing a great adventurer's unfinished quest and are asked to complete the quest and recover a piece of treasure. It's a really simple setup and it leads to a fairly standard escort mission, but it's still got a lot of fun in it and is well worth a look. Xanthoria is a 16th level adventure and the last entry in Candlekeep Mysteries, and it's about a dangerous fungus that's spreading along the Sword Coast, threatening all life. It's certainly a big enough hook to warrant the involvement of such a high-level adventuring party, and there are some interesting and fun mechanics here to keep it from becoming too stale. Do I think you should buy Candlekeep Mysteries, and is it worth your time as a DM? The answer is yes. While I do have some problems with it that we're going to talk about in a minute, I think for the most part it's a really good collection of adventures that are mostly interesting and can be slotted into most campaigns fairly easily. There's a lot of interesting ideas in the book, the art is gorgeous, and there's almost 40 new monsters to use in your games. Like I mentioned before, some of my biggest problems with the book are the lack of an adventure summary and the lack of an appendix. But really the bigger problem here is that it feels like a book that was written by around 20 people, but in bad ways as well as good. I love how diverse the writing credits of this book are, but I do think the book suffers from a lack of overarching vision showing DMs how these adventures could potentially connect together, Yawning Portal style, or serving as a guide throughout the book. Xanthoria ends, and that's just it, the book is over. I think this format of an anthology of adventures would really have benefited from being presented by an established character in the lore, similar to Xanathar or Tasha's Guide to Everything, where you have notes from a single voice to contextualize everything throughout all these disparate parts. That said though, it is really nice to have another collection of pretty well written adventures to draw from. With the exception of the first adventure, I don't think I'd run any of them exactly as presented, but there is a lot of information in this book that you can pull from and take inspiration for your own games. In terms of pure usefulness as a DM, Wizards of the Coast could have done some things like summaries and an appendix, which would have been big quality of life improvements, both for running the adventures as presented and also for using the content elsewhere. For players, I don't think there's much that justifies buying this book. There are new player options like magic items and things like that, but they're wrapped up within the adventures, which is going to lead to spoilers if you go looking for them. So if you're a player, I would pass on this book, but maybe encourage your DM to check it out. and if you're a DM, this is well worth checking out. Just be aware that it has some flaws. One of the things I love most about running and playing D&D is the loot. There's nothing like the feeling of coming to the end of a dungeon and discovering the wondrous artifact that the villain was guarding. Or as a dungeon master, there's no feeling like granting your players a powerful new boon, especially if it's cursed. That's why I'm really pleased that today's episode is sponsored by Kobold Press and the Vault of Magic. The Vault of Magic is a new book by legendary publisher Kobold Press that's absolutely stuffed with new magic items to use in your game and comes with more than 800 unique items to start with. The book features weapons and armors, items and potions for you to use in your game, and it also includes a selection of fabled items, items that start out low in power and grow and change alongside the player. These are some of my favourite items to give to my players because they can evolve with them and unlock new secrets and stories. The Vault of Magic is available as a PDF or hardback book, and there's even VTT support with the items coming pre-packaged and available in Roll20, Fantasy Grounds or Shard Tabletop. The book is loaded with excellent art depicting many of the items found within, which means it's super easy to entice your players with pretty pictures. The book also features guest designs from notable names in the industry, such as folks like Adam Bradford, Todd Kenrick and Deborah Ann Wall. The project is finishing at midnight Thursday, March 18th UTC, so there's less than 48 hours to get involved. There's a link in the description below that's going to take you to the Kickstarter page, and thanks again to Kobold Press for supporting the channel. Now, at the start of this video, I told you I'd be giving away a copy of Candlekeep Mysteries over on D&D Beyond, just like we did with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And if you want to be in with a chance to win, all you need to do is be a subscriber and tell me which adventure you're most looking forward to running down in the comments below. The winner will be announced on Friday, March 26th, so you've got plenty of time to share this video around with your friends. I'd love to know what your overall thoughts are on the book down in the comments below, but until next time, happy gaming.